Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. And today it's Take 5 with Steven Travers. And Steven always brings an excellent guest. He has done it again today. Someone that you will know if you're an SEC football fan, if you're a Roll Tide football fan, and if you're an NFL fan from the 70s. We have Scott Hunter, the quarterback, with us today. And Steven, what a find. This guy has a tremendous career. Obviously, he's tied together with you in your book, and there'll be plenty to talk about there. But thank you for bringing quarterback. James Scott Hunter was born on November 19th, 1947. He just celebrated his 78th birthday just a couple weeks ago. But
hurt me.
Yeah. Well, come on now, a baby boomer and also a legend for many different reasons. But Steven, why don't I turn it over to you first?
Well, thanks, Harper. And I just want to say that it's a true honor to have Scott Hunter on our show today. As you know, Harper, I've interviewed a lot of people and have had an opportunity to meet an awful lot of people in the world of sports and entertainment and a lot of legends. And I've interviewed a lot of these people, and a lot of these people have become friends of mine. One of my all-time favorite interviews ever is the man we're looking at down below, Mr. Scott Hunter, a legendary quarterback for Bear Bryant's Alabama Crimson Tide, a quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, a success in life, and a guy who, when people seek out information about Bear Bryant, and there's been a number of documentaries, and of course, we're falling more or less into that category today. When people seek out information about the late, great Paul Bear Bryant, this man, Scott Hunter, is one of the first people that they get to because he just has a very strong memory of him. He has an intelligence and a way of discerning what happened and what didn't happen during those crazy days when Alabama football was just an unbelievable force in the American South. And Scott Hunter was a big part of that. And I want to welcome you to Take 5 with Steven Travers. Welcome, Mr. Scott Hunter.
Well, thank you, Steven. Thank you for having me. And I certainly remember our interviews leading up to your fine book and having read, and you sent me a signed copy of the book, which I've still got in my library, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And you said it just like it was.
Well, thank you very much. Before you get in, Harper, I want to thank you very much for saying that. The book, which has been discussed ad infinitum on this show, is One Night, Two Teams, Alabama versus USC, and the Game That Changed a Nation, a 2007 book. It was a PNBA nominee for Best Book of the Year. It has been in development by top Hollywood producers to this very day, several of whom have been guests on the show, including the screenwriter Barry Kemp just last week. And also we've had other people who participated in that game from the Alabama side, from the USC side. And I talked to a good 40 to 50 people, both from Alabama and USC, who played in the game, coached in the game, saw the game, were members of the media during and around that time. So I got to the bottom of it. And thank you, Scott, for saying that, because that was truly what I was hoping to do. So thank you. And Harper, I know you're going to get started with the opening questions.
Well, sure. I appreciate it. Scott, we will talk about the game, your time there at Alabama, but Vigor High School. Tell us about your playing days when you were growing up, what it was like. Did you always know that you were going to be a quarterback? Is that something that from Pop Warner to getting into high school was important for you? Or were you a baseball guy, other sports? Did you like playing hockey? I don't think in the Deep South you played a whole lot of hockey, but talk a little bit about your background and when athletics started becoming a real important part of your life.
Well, I was growing up in Lucedale, Mississippi. My parents were divorced. Father moved up to Marietta, Georgia, and went to work for Lockheed, stayed with my mother, and I was supposed to go with my grandparents in Lucedale, Mississippi, and stay a couple of months, but wound up staying 10 years. And then I transferred to Vigor High School because they were throwing the ball, and they had a great coach, Glenn Yancey. He was using three wides. And so this is where I belong, and I had some guys that could run and catch the ball, and it worked out great. I attracted attention from a couple of colleges.
Yeah, to say the least. Well, it sounds to me like you did your own scouting, that you paid attention to things that were going on. If you were in a 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense, guess what? You're a dime a dozen in the Deep South. So what was like for you in terms of just knowing and recognizing what your talent was in terms of being able to be a quarterback and throw the ball deep and want to throw it in an offense that was productive for what you were capable of doing?
Yeah, I had a tire hanging from a tree in the backyard storyline, and I'd go out there and throw that ball through that swinging tire, and all the rest of the guys were off to the swimming pool or the drugstore or such, but I was throwing that ball through that tire all the time, trying to get good enough to get out of Lucedale.
Really? So you had, from a young age, a different perspective than most. Some guys, they just go because they go, and they are hanging out, bird dogging, doing whatever. You found that there was a skill set that you were able to take advantage of. Obviously, it got you to the National Football League, the highest level you could play. But what was it like before high school? Did you have aspirations? Was there a coach or a teammate? Was there a brother or sister, somebody to help inspire you to say, you know what, you're pretty good. You can get to the next level?
Yeah, I would go over to my neighbor's house. We didn't have a television, my grandparents, and she did. I would go over there and watch the NFL game on Sunday as fast as I could get from Sunday school and church to her house. I would watch the NFL game. And of course, those days there was only one, and generally it was the Bears or either the Redskins. But I saw what was going on there, the quarterbacks throwing the ball and so forth. And I said, that is what I want to do.
Well, you certainly did. When did Mr. Paul Bear Bryant enter your life?
You said there were a couple of schools that recruited you. Was that at the beginning of your junior year that you started to play and get some recruiters that would come watch you warm up and throw and get a chance to visit with you, or is that mostly your senior year?
No, not until about midway in my junior year. We played Robert E. Lee High School in Montgomery, and I had for those days, like a 250-yard passing, 20 out of 30, which is, as you know, those days, that was extremely different or exceptional for a high school quarterback.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That lit up everybody's recruiting base or information. And so therefore I was on everybody's radar after that.
Yeah. What's this kid down at Viger High School doing? And so people started seeing the numbers and all that. And the game was changing in an area that you were able to take advantage of it, weren't you, Scott?
Yeah. As you know, right around that period, that mid-60s, you were going from 3 yards in a cloud of dust to more something like the NFL game, two wides, tight ends getting downfield, throwing the football and so forth. And Florida State was throwing it. Florida with Steve Spurrier was throwing it. Alabama with Namath was throwing it. And Ole Miss had 2 or 3 quarterbacks that were throwing. Everybody was throwing the ball at that time, or beginning to throw the ball. And so therefore, I would have fitted into various systems.
What were the features that you had? Strong arm, your ability to be able to read a defense, being able to throw an 18-yard out with precision that helped propel you to the next level. Were there certain things that you worked on in practice? You said, I got to get better at this. I got to work on some of my weaknesses in order for my strengths to be enhanced. Is that the way you looked at it?
Well, there's 3 things that make you a passer at all levels: high school, college, and pro. Top passer. Number 1 is anticipation, and that's up here. You've got to be able to anticipate where the receiver is going to be, no matter your arm. Third, second after anticipation is arm strength. And you think, well, gosh, arm strength would be number 1, but arm strength basically doesn't matter that much with anticipation if you can't anticipate. So, and third was attitude. if you throw a bad ball or you throw an interception or so, it matters not. The only throw that counts is the next throw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great life lesson there. Was there a time or a coach in particular, your head coach or maybe an offensive coordinator, that started teaching you to read the field differently from a high school level to where you say, this can be something that I can use for the rest of my life? I know where that safety is. I know automatically I need to go to that out route, or I'm going to go to my dump off and hit the running back. Were there little life lessons that were a part of your early learning that were things that you could catapult from and help you later on?
My high school coach, Glenn Yancey at Vidor High School, would had the defense all dress out in game uniforms, and he got up on a ladder and he would take pictures at the snap of the pre-snap, snap of the ball, and then 1, 2, and 3 seconds after the snap, and he would have them move through the different coverages, and he would take snaps of those, and lo and behold, he would give them to me, and I would study them from the snap to the pre-snap to the snap to 1 second after, 2 seconds after, 3 seconds after, and he would ask me, what are you seeing here? Are you seeing zone? Are you seeing man-to-man? Are you seeing a blitz? And so forth. So he was way ahead of his time. Nowadays, you could do all that with a video very easily, but he was way ahead of his time with that concept.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really am interested in that because no one was doing that unless he had been taught or shown to do that and then apply that to his 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that are out there on the field, because that's unheard of, especially from the angle behind the goalposts. That that's the end zone camera look. That's what you see.
Right.
And that helped you to associate, obviously, with what you're going to see. And then depending on what the play call is, you're going to do things that are going to enhance your chance to complete a ball based on what the defense is doing.
You're exactly right. Picture of Coach Yancey there, but that's how forward-thinking he was.
Well, I love it. Yeah. Talk a little bit about the recruiting process. You end up going to Alabama. Was there something in particular? I mean, you're an Alabama kid. You were winning all kinds of awards your senior year. You had a great year. Did you make your decision just before announcement day? I believe that's the first Wednesday in February. Was it still then back in those days? And talk a little bit about the recruiting process itself and what it meant to you to have them looking at you.
Right. I really liked Auburn. My uncle was owned the sporting goods store in Auburn. So I had family connections to Auburn. I had family connections to Georgia. I liked Florida because Steve Spurrier was there, and I saw how they were throwing the ball, which was similar to what I did. And of course, Florida State, Bobby Bowden was recruiting me as the assistant coach for a recruiting area. So I liked Florida State in that they were throwing the football, and so therefore there were several other schools too. Cal came around and they were throwing the football. Mother didn't want me to go to California, but whatever the case. And so anyway, imagine that. So anyway, but I had chances, West Point and so forth, but I've narrowed it down to the 4 or 5 schools that were throwing the football with, pro-style, sophisticated type passing systems, and I knew that's where I would have my best opportunity to play and also potentially play one day in the NFL.
Amazing. Yeah. I like the way you analyze it. You break it down in that this might be best for me. Obviously, kids do that all the time, but for you, we're talking about 66, 67 when you ended up enrolling, and freshmen had to sit out back in those days. Was that a hindrance for you? Do you feel like you were game ready, or was that a great asset for you to where you got to learn school, where classes were going to be, how you work on your degree, and then just play freshman football, 4 or 5 games, and get yourself ready for that following year when you were going to have your first year of eligibility as a sophomore?
Yeah, I think it's how you take it. Nowadays, obviously, I would go to a school that I want to have an opportunity to play as a freshman. But those days, you knew your freshmen were, were not eligible. So therefore, you knew you weren't going to play that year. So you set your mind to doing what you had to do to get yourself better preparing against the varsity, as the so-called scout team and so forth. So you knew what you had to do. So it wasn't going to be any change whether I went to Florida, Florida State, Alabama, Auburn, or anywhere else. The freshmen were not going to be eligible.
Well, yeah, Bart Starr. You mentioned Joe Namath, Kent Stabler was there at the time that you were there. It's a pretty amazing group of Alabama quarterbacks that went on to have fantastic careers, or at least get looked at in the National Football League. Tell me, what was it like for you being involved with that type of history, being in the same room with some of those guys during their peak, and obviously with the offensive coordination running things the Alabama way?
Well, that was part of it. Alabama had quarterbacks like Bart Starr and Namath, Stabler, who I was going to play with, but really was going to be the starter until he moved on. So, but they had a history, and Coach Bryant liked to throw the football. That was quite obvious. So it just fit it fit for me to go to Alabama.
Yeah. We mentioned Coach Bryant. I appreciate you still doing that. I hear so many interviews of players that long afterwards they still call him coach. There's that respect factor. I have a friend that we've had on the show who still calls Al Davis Mr. Davis. There's a respect factor there. When you first met the man, what was, I guess he was asking, well, how do you like it here, son? Do you want to come to the University of Alabama? And then we're going to move you on and go sign the paperwork. Was that the first meeting that you had with him one-on-one?
So it's the summer, and they're having the high school coaches clinic in Tuscaloosa, and Darrell Royal was the guest speaker for the clinic. So my recruiting coach, Jimmy Sharp, was carrying me into the coach's office. This is there on University Avenue at the University of Alabama, and Coach Bryant and Coach Royal came out. We're coming down the walkway. Well, Coach Bryant sees me, and Jimmy, Coach Sharp, said, Coach Bryant, this is Scott Hunter, the quarterback from Viger. I said, I know who you are, son. I know who you are. He shakes my hand. He said, he's the one that had that great game against Robert E. Lee. We watched the film of it and so forth, and Jimmy, he's just prepping me up all the way. And Coach Bryant looked at me and he said, son, y'all lost that game, didn't you? We had lost 27-26. I could not believe that Coach Bryant could remember who won or lost a high school football game. And I thought, I was so impressed. Now, maybe some prospects would get angry, get upset, didn't like that, or anyway, but I thought he knew that I had a great game, and we'd come back from ahead, then come back from behind, but lost by a point, and I was so impressed by that.
There are little things that he would do. Everyone talks about what a master of psychology he was as a coach to his players. Go ahead.
He told me, I asked him about it, several years later when I was already playing with the Packers and so forth. I said, Coach, what? He said, well, I figured if you got mad and upset, you decided to go to Auburn or Georgia or Florida, I didn't want you anyway. But if it made you, if it challenged you to come here, you were going to be mine.
How about that? I mean, again, little nuances that man was able to do that are a little different from what other coaches would want. Hey, we're going to schmooze you. We're going to wine and dine you when you come out here for the visit. But then there's that time when you got to go to work, right? You put the pads on for the first time. And I think it's, son, at the University of Alabama, we practice until we get it right. Is there a truth to that? I've heard other players say that that's exactly what they were told. We practice till we get it right.
So I was attending a college game with my grandson, who's a snapper, who's going to be a prospect. And the school we were attending lost the game, and the quarterback just simply couldn't put together two plays back to back. And then, as you know, you got to do that to win. So afterwards, the head coach, after he spoke with my grandson, got me off to the side, and we'd been friends for 20 years. So what can I do? What can I do to win these kind of games? They had lost. And I said, Coach, you got to have a quarterback that can put 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plays back to back and get the ball in scoring range and score. You just can't have a guy that can do 1 or 2 good plays back to back and the third is a bust. And he said, I know it. I just can't. I don't have anybody else. Well, we're in a scrimmage in the stadium. I think I was a spring of my freshman year or going into my sophomore year. And I think I threw an interception or took a sack in field goal range. And Coach Bryant sitting up there by himself. Nobody would sit within 40 yards of him. He got up and he came down there and he came around the field, came over there, and I saw him coming. I said, uh-oh, here it comes. He didn't yell. He didn't do anything like that. He just got up and got me a little off to the side, put that arm around me and said, Scott. He could make Scott into a 3-syllable word. Scott, you got to put a good play behind a good play, behind a good play, behind a good play, and put the ball in the end zone and get it through the uprights and put points on the board with back-to-back good plays, or you can't play here. There you are.
That's all it took. There's some coaches that don't make corrections.
And so it didn't matter how good I was throwing the football. What mattered was putting back to back to back to back good plays.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like I had one quarterback friend of mine? I went to Colorado State University. I was there in the early 80s. And a quarterback said it this way. He said, I was so nervous going out onto that field that I was going to get pulled, that if I didn't play flawless, I was going to lose my job and not get to play for the rest of the season. And he said, I played with one eye down the side or down the field, and I had one eye on the sideline that was watching for a coach ready to go. That's it. You're done. You can't do this. Yes, you're going to throw an incompletion every now and then, but did that evade you? Did you have the confidence going out there knowing that he's not going to put you out there unless you are going to be ready to go? And yeah, you can throw a couple of incompletions. There are going to be times where you have to punt, but there's also that time where you put the play and the drive and the next drive and the next drive, and you end up winning a ball game. Building confidence for you is what I'm asking about, Scott. How did Bear Bryant do that with you?
Well, we were not doing well against Virginia Tech my sophomore year. The senior, who was a good quarterback in spring and August, but frankly, just kind of blew up, if you will, in that game. And he told me I was going in the start of the second quarter. Our safety, Tommy Wade, ran the punt back to about the Virginia Tech 20. I went in, and they running what they call a wide tackle 6. You can't run against that. You're outnumbered. So I went in there and ran the play that came in with the running back. He came out faster than he went in. So our second play, they sent in something else. I said, I ain't running that. I got in slot, called a pass to George Raniger, or called a pass that was, if Raniger got open, I could hit him. I hit him at my first pass at Alabama for a touchdown, and that was that.
How about that? Well, your freshman year, you don't get to play a whole heck of a lot. What about sophomore year? In 68, you go 8-3. You lose to Missouri in the Gator Bowl, but that was first year in college. You're at Bryant-Denny for some games. Well, back then it wasn't called Bryant-Denny, but you're in Birmingham at Legion Field for a couple of the big games. What was that experience like for you at the college level, knowing that there isn't an empty seat in the house and you're playing football at the very finest level?
Well, again, that's why you go to Alabama, to play at that level and play in those kind of games. And that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I'd seen Alabama on television. I'd been in some of the games. Had not been to a game in Birmingham before I'd signed, but I wanted to play at that level. And that just was all there was to it. There was nothing else that I could think of. But I wanted to play there and play at that level. So consequently, that's the place to go. And, at those days, Birmingham had I think 80,000 seats, and Tuscaloosa only had like 55-ish or so. So the big games were in Birmingham, and particularly the TV games were in Birmingham. So that was the reason Alabama split sites.
Did that make it bigger for you, the game, and the reason? It's really a road trip. It's a small one, right? It's an hour and a half, maybe 90 minutes up the road to Birmingham.
Well, when you've got Alabama state troopers doing 85 miles an hour in front of you, it's only about a 40-minute trip to Birmingham.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And every one of those troopers is going to, they don't want to avoid being part of the convoy, right? But they are going to move some people out of the road. Hey,
Yeah, well,
the
they
team is
were
coming through.
convoy. They were out in front, moving everybody out of the way. So,
Yeah, good times there. Hey, go to your sophomore year, or excuse me, your junior year. That would have been 1969. Obviously, the matchup with Ole Miss and Archie Manning and all that. What was that like from your perspective? Because it was a great game. It was a back and forth. You guys always, obviously you end up winning that football game, and really the underdog in Ole Miss that everybody was rooting for was so close, but yet you pulled it out. Talk a little bit about your experience with that.
well, Archie, Ole Miss hadn't done very well the week before. They had been beaten by Kentucky, so I didn't really know what to expect. I knew Archie was a good quarterback because they had beaten us our sophomore year over in Jackson. So I knew he could throw and I knew he could run. And so consequently, I prepared myself getting all that week. I was calling my own plays, and I prepared myself for a high-scoring game. And lo and behold, it became one. So I knew every time we got the ball, it didn't matter what the score was. We had to go out and take it down the length and score. So there was no surprise when Ole Miss was ahead later in the game, and we had to come from behind and score to win the game. Archie just had an incredible game. He threw for 450 something yards, ran for 100 yards or so. It was just a phenomenal game by him. And of course, it was on national television, and that even made it bigger. So, but anyway, I knew what I had to do because I knew he was going to put points on the board. And I'd be sitting there looking at a Polaroid that had come down from the press box, looking at their coverage, and I'd hear the Ole Miss band crank up, and the Ole Miss fans off to my right, I'd hear them start cheering when their band. I said, well, Archie scored again.
Yeah, 33-32. And you mentioned this. This is the first nationally televised game. I know that college game. Please forgive me.
In prime time, like Saturday night, there had been
Yes.
bowl games. They'd been just a
regular season game. Scott,
game.
this is a part of NCAA and American history. There were obviously regional games, and most people in the Midwest would see Ohio State or Michigan, or they watch Illinois play or whoever. But for the whole country to be able to see that now with streaming and everything, you can watch your team from anywhere in the country, but that didn't exist before. So you're a part of something that was so magical in terms of the relationship between a viewer, a television network, and a couple of games that are going on at the SEC, Big Ten, Pac-8, whatever level. It's fascinating. And when I'm doing my research about you, I have to ask one about the game itself, which I'm glad I did. But now that you've been a part of that history and seeing that it's commonplace right now, did that mean anything extra to you after the game, just to know
it? Coach Bryant called me in his office, in the summertime, and said they're going to televise the game. Birmingham Legion Field is upgrading the lights, and ABC has asked us to move the game in the afternoon to the evening. He wanted, of course, to let me know. And he said, but they've got a problem. The game might not start late because Lawrence Welk is live. And
Yes.
He has a non-preemption clause, and they're back and forth with him right now over him preempting and letting us start at 7 instead of 8 o'clock Central. And anyway, I knew who Lawrence Welk was.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, because my mother, when I was growing up, would turn on. Finally, we got that TV, and she'd turn it on, and she'd tell me to sit down and shut up when Lawrence Welk came on. So I knew who he was.
How about that? Bubbles, tiny bubbles. Did you remember the tiny bubbles that he had? And yes.
The game didn't really start till about 8:20, 8:15ish or 8:20. And anyway, it went on to 11:30ish or so, which was fantastic because all over the East, New York, no TVs were turned off because it was back and forth. And of course, on out to the West Coast, everybody out there was sitting by their TV watching it. And so it just became a national phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah. The NFL was, when you were a kid, you say to get home after church and Sunday school, you'd watch an NFL game, but Saturday hadn't been taken over yet. And again, that's just part of the history that I appreciate you being a part of. You end up going. Go ahead.
Ren Rodgers told me years later. He said there was a big argument at ABC, but the entertainment side didn't want to preempt the Saturday night lineup, including Lawrence Welk, and he kept arguing with the higher ups that this would work, a college game, Ole Miss and Alabama and Deep South, two teams. Who would care about that? Why isn't it Ohio State and Michigan or so? But he kept arguing with the higher ups and finally won the battle. And of course, he was very happy with the result regarding the television viewership and the numbers that watched it.
Well, for obvious reasons, Scott, you are part of a really good game as well. 33-32 right there at the very end. An entertaining game. And even if you had never seen college football before, if you're watching that for the very first time, if you're a Martian landing from your planet and you were able to see that, you go, hey, this is a lot more exciting than watching some guy with a baton in his hand talking about bubbles. Come on now. This is good stuff right here.
Oh, don't decry my mother's favorite band leader.
She can still be the favorite, but I'm telling you, Mom, you're going to want to watch this too. Let's put this in. And we're not going to tell you to shut up, but we're going to say this is a great game, and you were a part of that for obvious reasons. That's the great the historical side of this from my perspective is that, if it were a 42-0 blowout game that wasn't exciting, maybe the viewership would have been different. But everybody that watched that said, this is really cool. This is college football is worth spending some time, and maybe we want to invest. I'm glad Rune was able to visit with you. You have a broadcasting career, and I would love to talk about that. But first and foremost, is there anything else at Alabama? I know that you were 6-5 that year that you played Ole Miss in that was 69, and in 70, 6-5-1. So not great national championship years, but still formidable in creating the Scott Hunter that was able to go into the National Football League.
Well, we could throw the ball, move the ball, and score. Just football was changing then, and Coach Bryant just quite hadn't made the transition to the big, strong, fast guy that the Tennessees and the LSUs and Auburns and Missouris and so forth, the teams we were competing against were getting. But, of course, he started to with John Hanna, and that moved on to the Baumhauers, Bob Baumhauers and so forth. But yeah, we were a little bit undersized and out, if you will, during that my second and third year against offenses that really were powerful. So we were a little undersized and under strength, if you will.
Well, for obvious reasons, that 70 season was a game changer, and I'll keep it at that. And Steven, obviously, this goes into your book and everything like that. So I'll bow out for a couple seconds. I want to make sure that we spend plenty of time visiting again. I know you've interviewed with Steven before and all that, but for our audience, this will all be new information. Steven, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Harper. Well, you've teed it up beautifully. A couple of observations. One, Bear Bryant and his ability to remember things. I recently read about a celebrity who was doing an interview, and he recalled an interview that he had done with that same person maybe 10 years earlier and called all the questions. And this is straight out of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, he was a very smart guy, and he remembered and understood the details. So this was a detail in his recruiting of you, is to remember the fact that you played a close game, played well, but lost to Robert E. Lee High School. And getting to these games that you're talking about, I mean, from my standpoint, I'm a kid growing up on the West Coast. We're for the first time getting color television. And color television was absolutely amazing when this comes about. And I remember this game against Ole Miss. And what I remember about it was the colors and the fans and the green field. and oh, the Crimson Tide uniform and the white against the red. And I remember that game. And so Archie, and I also remember reading about it in Sports Illustrated, because I read everything that I could get my hands on and watched everything that I could see. Now, I want to get into that 1970 game against USC, but there is a game that I want to ask you about. This is another game that I saw you play. I didn't see that 1970 game because it was on radio, not on television. I listened to it on the radio with my dad against USC. But I did see you play another game, and this was another one that just fascinated me. It was the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl. It was in the Houston Astrodome. It was against Oklahoma. And again, the uniforms, the contrast, the AstroTurf. And this was a big, tough game that you played. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that Astro Bluebonnet Bowl game?
That was the old Astro Bluebonnet Bowl in the Astrodome, of course, which doesn't host football any longer. But Oklahoma was a pretty talented team, even though they had lost to Nebraska for the Big 8 championship. And I knew then we had to put points on the board because they were going to do the same thing, and they did. So anyway, this thing came down to we're down 17. We were down.
Mm-hmm.
And Coach Bryant calls in a reverse pass from Johnny Musso to me. Well, stupidly, I called Johnny, who's left-handed, running to the right rather than to his left. I call him running to his right, which means he's got to stop, reverse his feet, and try to get the ball out. And my job was to kind of wander out after I handed off and get lost before the ball was thrown back to me. And so I went through that. I said, he'll never get it off. I looked back, and all I saw was a sea of Oklahoma red all over him. And all of a sudden, I saw the ball pop out and fluttering like a duck. And here it came. I reached down and caught it right at my ankles. And I'm running behind our receiver, David Bailey, who's got his hands up in the air like he's going to catch a pass. And he's got the Oklahoma defender looking over his shoulder up in the air for the ball. And I just snuck in about 30 yards right behind him for the touchdown to go ahead 24-21. And I thought to myself, boy, if that play had not worked, I might as well pack it up with the Oklahoma team and head up to Oklahoma City, see if I can get in school.
Get up in arm. Hey, do you mind me interrupting real quick? You said the old Astrodome. Back then, it was brand new. I mean, it just opened. So maybe not that year.
65-ish or so it opened, thereabouts, I think.
Yes.
They're about maybe 5 years or so older.
And for those that may not know, the Astrodome invented AstroTurf because they had glass in that enclosed stadium, and the ultraviolet rays of the sun weren't strong enough to allow natural grass to grow in there, so they had to come up with some chemical solution. And then obviously with the connection to the space age and the development of the Genesis and Apollo rockets and everything that Houston was a part of. Houston, we have a problem. They created a special surface, AstroTurf. You hadn't played on much AstroTurf prior to that game, had you?
No. Well, we had played Houston, the University of Houston, earlier in the season in the Astrodome. So we had that advantage to playing on it and knowing a little bit about it from that respect.
And they had a good team, too, in those days, as I recall.
Yeah, Houston was good. They had 3 number ones on that team. Yeah,
they were good. Now, one last question before we get to the 1970 game. Do you have any Ken Stabler stories that you can tell on Take 5 with Steven Travers?
Let's see if I got any I can share.
Well, some of them might include brown liquor, I think.
Everyone already knows those stories. and Kenny was having a terrible game against LSU down in Baton Rouge. And I'm beside Coach Bryant with a clipboard where I'm supposed to be, and Kenny, of course, calling his own plays. And I'm watching, writing down the plays, and all Coach Bryant's looking. Kenny's throwing an interception, another interception. And Coach Bryant's getting madder and madder, and I can hear him cursing under his breath and carrying on. And finally, Kenny comes over there, and Coach Bryant says something about a play call or something. And Kenny said, "Well, Coach, I'm calling my own plays, and I thought that would work." That Foley, that Baldwin County Foley accent. And I thought, oh no. And Coach Bryant, and he took that Chesterfield out of his mouth, and he let out a stream of some things I can't even repeat on a show like this. And Kenny turned and ran back on the field since it was a timeout, and the timeout was concluding. He turned to me, he said, "Get over there and get a ball and warm up. I'm putting you in the next series." Well, I was a red shirt. And as you know, those days you walk on the field and run a play, your red shirt year is blown.
Gone. Yep.
So I thought, okay. So I go over there and I get the ball and I start warming up with Jimmy Sharp comes over, assistant coach. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Coach Bryant said he's putting me in the next series." And he just threw his arms around me. He said, no, we can't blow a red shirt year. Coach Bryant came, by that time, Coach Bryant came up and said, "You ready?" And Jimmy said, Coach, please, we can't blow a red shirt year by putting him out there 1 or 2 series. Please. Coach Bryant, I'll let you, well, I could say what he said again. He turned around finally and listened to Jimmy, went on back out there and started watching the game. So that was how that happened.
Did Stabler rally and win the game?
No, yeah, we won the game. Yeah, our defense held LSU to 3 points, and Kenny finally got a couple of plays and put them all together. I think he threw a touchdown pass with it. We won it. I think so, 10-7 or 10-3.
He sweated out a little bit of that brown alcohol from the night before, and was ready to go in the second half. Okay, now we've set it up very nicely. It's January 1970. It's the beginning of what will be your senior year. That's going to be in the fall. And an announcement comes down from the NCAA, and the announcement says college football is no longer to be limited to 10 games. You can now play 11 games. So the first reaction is, oh, great, we'll play Appalachian State or McNeese State. We'll play some sort of team that we can, it'll be an opener, and we'll draw 40, 50,000 people and make some money, and it'll be a practice game. Paul Bear Bryant is in Palm Desert playing golf at the Bob Hope Desert Classic. He loved to play golf. And he also is good friends with John McKay. And he calls John McKay, head football coach, University of Southern California. Says, "John, I want you to meet me at the Horizon Room at Los Angeles International Airport. I want to talk to you about something very important." McKay senses what is happening. Mm-hmm. And he brings his assistant, Craig Fertig, who's a pretty good quarterback in his own right, to the Horizon Room. And he says to Fertig, according to Craig, he says Bear's going to integrate his program. And somehow or other, Craig is like, some history is going to be made and we're going to be part of it. Question for you is, now you're in your 4th or 5th year with Bear Bryant. Were you familiar with his friendship with John K. McKay, or with John McKay? His son is John K. McKay.
No, I had no knowledge of their relationship or friendship at all. And all I knew was I got a call from the Birmingham News in the football dorm, and hey, Coach Bryant and Coach McKay have agreed that Southern Cal will come to Birmingham and be the 11th game. And I was thrilled because I was as I've told you, Stephen, I was a Southern Cal fan, watching it from all the way back in the days of OJ, even back to the Rose Bowl years. I think the Wisconsin Southern Cal game of 1960 or so, that went on forever. And so I was a big Southern Cal fan. I thought this couldn't be better. Alabama and Southern Cal.
So everyone knows that USC is an integrated team, and they're going to be coming to Legion Field in Alabama. What were some of the anecdotes that were going on in terms of your teammates, spring practice, what was said in the press, your attitude, the attitude of other players? Give me an idea of what young people in Alabama were thinking about something like this at this particular time.
Well, that preceding summer, I'd gone with a NCAA group to Vietnam on a morale booster, and Mel Gray, receiver at Missouri, who went on to have a great NFL career with then the St. Louis Football Cardinals. Anyway, Mel and I were playing football with soldiers and against soldiers on the beach in the train, and I dropped back 5 steps. I threw the ball as far as I could throw it, and Mel had to slow down for it. Get this out of the way here. Anyway, Mel had to slow down for it. I couldn't throw the ball further than he could run. And so I went back, and when Coach Bryant was asking me when I got back about some experiences, I'm sorry, guys, I should turn that off. Experiences, I told him about that one with Mel Gray, and I said, gosh, Coach, it'd be great to have that kind of speed. I didn't care what color Mel Gray was. I just like to throw to that kind of speed. So, and I could tell by the way he brought, I'm sorry, excuse me. Anyway, I could tell by the way that he took that he knew exactly what I was talking about. It didn't matter what color Mel Gray was. Coach Bryant knew what the value of speed was.
Good players, strong players, fast players. You need them, right, to compete against LSU and Kentucky and Tennessee, right?
Bingo.
Yep.
Well, Bear Bryant, 1965, Bear Bryant did an interview with Look magazine, and in that interview, he said, I want to be the Branch Rickey of the Southeastern Conference. And he was well known for knowing and often speaking with black football coaches at Bessemer and some of the other high schools in Alabama. And he always told them there's going to come a day in which the black players we're going to be able to get him into Alabama. Basically, he's going to be talking about post George Wallace. And when that day comes, he would say, I want you to send these guys to Old Bear. So this was all going on. Now, there was a player from Alabama, and we talked about him a little bit before the show, his name Wilbur Jackson. And he was recruited during the time that you were there to be the first African-American football player at the University of Alabama. Now, he was a freshman in 1970, and as we were talking about, ineligible to play, but he was in the program. What was the effect of Wilbur Jackson? What do you think that perhaps Bryant was setting the table for Wilbur Jackson or other players like Wilbur Jackson? He wanted maybe his fans to see integrated players on the field, classy teams of different colors. Do you think that the Jackson recruiting was a factor in his decision to play USC? What's your opinion on this?
Well, Stephen, I probably hadn't done a good job of telling you this. I'm home for Christmas before we went to that Oklahoma Bluebonnet Bowl. And my mother comes in at 7 a.m. and said, Coach Bryant's on the phone. I go in there, yes, sir. Scott, there's this prospect down there in Mobile named John Mitchell. And he went to high school there, and he's at a junior college out there in Arizona. And I was out in California this weekend, and John McKay has signed him and so forth and everything, and wants to sign him and everything and so forth. But I think we got a chance to get him. I want you to bring him over to your house tomorrow night for dinner. So I'm going to ask the Judge McCray, he was the local recruiter in Mobile, it's pretty strong, to bring him over to your house. And anyway, I said, yes, sir, Coach. Yes, sir. He said, now, you just get some steak and some shrimp and just save the bill for me. So anyway, I called my stepfather, who by that time was gone to his work. And I told him about Coach Bryant calling and John Mitchell and the story with McKay and so forth. And I said, now, Bill, my stepfather, I said, this is a black player. But as you know, you were at the Southern Cal game. You know, we've got to start recruiting black players. We talked about that. And he was from Neely, Mississippi. And there was about a 10-second pause. He said, he's a black player? I said, yes. He said, well, can you ask the judge just to bring him over after sundown? So anyway, as terrible it was. So John walks in with Judge McCray the next night. John dips under the door frame. My stepfather looked up at him at that and said, wow, we got to have you. So John Mitchell actually was the first black player to play at Alabama. Wilbur, of course, being ineligible that next year as a freshman. So John had a fantastic team against your USC Trojans in their 71 game.
Yeah.
And Alabama, Alabama won that game.
Yeah. Well, that brings to mind a couple of really great anecdotes. Okay. It is true that Wilbur Jackson was the first player recruited. John Mitchell was the first player to actually play in a game. Right. He was running down the sideline on the opening kick. This is the next year at the LA Coliseum. And I'm going to tell this story, and then I'm going to tell another story that kind of leads into the irony of this. He's running right past John McKay, and McKay just sees Mitchell come and go, and he turns to Craig Fertig, and McKay had this ironic way of talking, and he goes, well, that's what you get. To give you a little better idea of what he was talking about is, as I mentioned, McKay and Bryant were exceptionally good friends. They got together every off season, often to play golf, often when Bryant would be in Palm Springs for the Bob Hope Desert Classic. Sometimes they'd go duck hunting in Alabama. Sometimes they'd stay at Coach McKay's house. In fact, one time they even went to a restaurant in Beverly Hills, and Frank Sinatra invited them to their table. And Brian and McKay said, tell Blue Eyes he can come to our table, which is what he did. But they're playing golf. This leads to the phone call to you. And I don't know if you remember this or know this, but while playing golf, McKay just kind of casually says, Bear, I got recruited a player from the South, African-American fella named John Mitchell. Brian did not know who John Mitchell was. He goes, yeah, where's he playing? Oh, he's at Eastern Arizona Junior College, and he's a really good player. I think he's a pro prospect, and he's going to play for us. And I know John Mitchell, and I interviewed him, and Mitchell was thrilled to play for McKay. He's telling me the peristyles and the Coliseum and USC campus and John McKay. Are you kidding? I was thrilled. And I didn't, in his words, I didn't even think about the possibility of Alabama. But of course, things are changing. Wilbur Jackson and other events are taking place. And so Bryant doesn't say anything to McKay. Oh, congratulations. This is when he gets back to the clubhouse. He finds a payphone and he calls your friend, the judge.
Yep, Judge McCray.
Then I think the next phone call is the aforementioned phone call to you to have the steak and Barbie all set up.
Yep.
for John Mitchell to be wined and dined at your house in Mobile, Alabama. So that, and then Mitchell, he gets this word that Bryant wants him. He's like, holy cow, Bear Bryant in Alabama. As much as I like USC, this is a chance to play for Bear Bryant. And he later said it was the greatest experience of his life. When he got out of school, he played in the pros. And then he wanted to get a master's degree, and he showed up sight unseen to Bryant's office. Coach, I need a job. Gives him a job on his staff so he can pay for school. And he just said, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have had any of the success or the career I had without Bear Bryant. But that's moving forward a little bit. And I just wanted to tell that story because it's one of my favorite stories about this whole adventure.
Well, Steven, you're to be complimented too. A few years ago, Wilbur and John were at an unveiling of a plaque. If you ever get to Tuscaloosa, the plaque in the front of Denny Stadium as our two first African American players. So, and you're a part of that.
Well, I intend to be in Tuscaloosa next year. I'd mentioned to you my friend Jim Jones, who has season tickets to the Tide, and I'm going to be there I was going to be there this year, but I moved to New England and I just had so many expenses. I sort of put off all those little road trips, but I'm going to do it next year where I'm going to call you and we are going to meet, and we're going to meet before a game. And and hopefully meet some other guys too. We'll kind of leave that up to you.
Happy to carry you to the A Club luncheon before the game and introduce you around and let every one of them beat you up.
Well, I'm looking forward to that one. So now let's get to the game. Here comes USC. USC is unbeaten and untied the previous year. They've won a national championship maybe 2 years earlier. They've lost maybe 2 games in 3 or 4 years. They are at this point more or less a team at the level of where Nick Saban's teams have been at Alabama. And they're at the level where Bear Bryant's teams had been at Alabama just a few years earlier. They're at the top of the game. These are the 2 best coaches, the 2 best programs. And you're getting ready. It's going to be at Birmingham. And here come the Trojans. And here comes this sophomore running back named Sam Bam Cunningham. Who did you know anything about him? What was your scouting report on the Trojans? Did you expect what you saw? Did you expect that kind of size, speed? What was the reaction of Scott Hunter when the game starts?
I had no idea who Sam Cunningham was. He didn't show up on the scouting reports. I don't think he was a starter at fullback going into the season. I think maybe the starting fullback was injured in preseason. Is that correct? And so
Yes.
nobody knew who he was, but I certainly knew who he was by about the middle of the third quarter.
Well, he just got off to an unbelievable start, and there's not an awful lot of film on that game, but what there is, I have seen. It's basically him just sort of rolling off of people. And also, if you look at the cover of my book, Logan, if you could put the cover of my book back up, that's a very telling picture. You see Cunningham's size, and you see a couple of Alabama players. Let me see here. I think we're going to. And you see a couple of Alabama players. We don't see their faces necessarily, but we can sense trepidation. And Cunningham, Cunningham was also a decathlon athlete in track. He was, in fact, only a sophomore. He was highly recruited, but there was a player ahead of him who had, there was an injury. But frankly, he simply was not in Cunningham's league. There was another running back named Clarence Davis. And Clarence, you may have known about, he had a good year the previous year. He had grown up. Well, he didn't grow up, but he had been born and lived in the Birmingham area for a couple of years before moving to Los Angeles. Did you know about Clarence Davis?
No, I had no knowledge of that until it was, told that I think his grandmother lived in Birmingham and was from Birmingham.
Okay, maybe you can clear up a little bit of a misconception. I'm not a misconception, but a story that was told to me by your teammate, Mr. Hanna. What was his first name again?
John
Hanna. Great player, only a sophomore at the time, later an All-American. And John Hanna tells a story that obviously Bryant's practices were tough, and there was the legend of the Texas A&M players who walked away from camp because it was too difficult. In fact, one of them was the great Express player who I actually met a couple of years ago. Not the Birmingham Express. Anyway, he was a player in Texas who played for Bear Bryant, and his son was a teammate of mine in high school. And I finally had a chance to meet him and talk with him just a couple of years ago. But the practices were difficult. But in general, when you start getting towards the first game of the season, you start cutting back a little bit. Maybe it's not so much one-on-one with full pads, more walkthrough, more strategy. John Hannah said that within a short period of time, I don't think it was the day before the game, it was only a couple of days before the game, there was a practice that was one of the most excruciating practices that he ever had under Bryant. And according to John Hannah, we're going to have to get him on this show. John Hannah told me that he was so tired that he went back to his dorm room in his uniform and fell asleep on his cot and was too tired to take his uniform off and had determined to quit Alabama football. And he was too tired to quit because he fell asleep on the bed in his uniform with his equipment still on. When he finally woke up, he goes, "Oh, well, I don't even know where Coach Bryant is right now to even find him. I'm too tired to even try to find him to quit." So according to him, that's why he stayed on. But he always said, why did we have this crazy practice so close to the game? What was the psychology of it? Do you remember this practice? Did you ever talk about John Hannah about it? And what's your feeling about this?
Well, it was a scrimmage, and it was brutally hot. It was practice, August in Alabama, and it was a scrimmage. And all the first teamers, pretty much, we did 20, 30 minutes, and then we all were told to go over there and sit down and get in the shade. But John was left in there for play after play after play, and I could see him, hear him breathing and everything else. And Coach Bryant standing right behind the offensive huddle, and he's getting on Hannah and so forth. And so anyway, I could see this was really going the wrong way. And I thought, gosh, I hope John just doesn't just walk off the field. We got to have him. He was obviously the best lineman on the team, had been since he was a freshman even. And when he was ineligible, he still was the best lineman. But anyway, Coach Bryant finally had just set this up. And he said, "You want to quit? You want to quit? Well, go tell that guy over on the sideline you want to quit." Well, there was his father, Bull Hannah, standing over there, who played for the New York Giants back in the day. And Bull stood about 6'3" or 4", about 275, and he had his hands on his hips. John got right back squared up in the huddle.
Wow.
Coach Bryant and John's father, Bull, they had set that up.
So he was a master psychologist.
Master.
I don't even know if John knew all the information that you just talked about, at least when I talked to him. Okay, so the game gets started, and Cunningham is pretty much running roughshod over everybody, and including young John Hannah.
Well, now John was on offense now.
Yeah, that's true.
He was on offense, not defense.
Yeah, but John Hannah was talking about the crowds, and he was saying, obviously the crowd at an Alabama game you're hearing roll tide throughout the game, and it's somewhat intimidating and it's loud. And he said, slowly but surely, as the game wore on, we get into the second half, and it's just not going the Tide's way. All of a sudden, he's describing hearing vendors going Coca-Cola, and you couldn't hear it Roll Tide anymore. And some amazing things started happening. There was a section of black fans that they could be heard. They were cheering for USC. The game ends. SC wins 42-21, and you weren't there to see this, but as the USC players are coming out of the locker room, the dressing room, getting into the bus, black people in Alabama are showing up with candles, singing Christian hymnals, and going up to these players as if they're Moses. It was a very important game for these people. And to what extent did you understand what was happening? Was it all happening too quickly? How emotional was it? As just a young guy, what was going through your head to the extent that you could discern what was happening?
Well, I think I summed it up for you with your book. Having that experience, of course, in the previous summer, with Mel Gray over in Vietnam, I knew a little bit about speed, but I also got a lesson that night in big, strong, fast people, be they black or be they white, can beat small, short, quick people almost every time. And that was the case that night. That they just were bigger, stronger, and faster. Their white guys were bigger, stronger, and faster. Their black guys were bigger, stronger, and faster. And then I told you, if they had a polka dot guy, he was bigger, stronger, and faster. So that was finally, Alabama fans could look down there and see what big, strong, and fast players, no matter what color they are, can accomplish. I remember going to the gas station on Monday, and the gas station owner will always come out on Monday and fill the tank, and he'd want to talk about the game. And he came out and said, "Scott, what are y'all going to do?" "Well, I think we're already recruiting. John. Of course, I didn't know about John Mitchell then, but we're already recruiting black players and so forth." And he said, "Well, we better get some in a hurry."
It is amazing because, and I've heard this from a lot of different people, including Jeff Prue, who covered that game for the LA Times, and he heard of similar anecdote in a coffee shop before he got on the airplane. But I've tried to understand what the changes in America in the 1960s, and they are drastic. I don't think there's ever been a decade in the history, maybe the history of the world, that changed so much between one decade and another, other than, say, communist revolution or some crazy thing like that, the Nazis taking over in Germany or something like that. But in terms of a peaceful country and a revolution of thought, and the way people dressed and the way people talked and music and so many different things, I've always felt that the Vietnam War played a large role in the way young people thought. And you were a young person, and you had to know people who were in Vietnam. You had to have gone to high school with some. You probably knew some at the University of Alabama. To what extent do you think the war played a role? Because the war was being fought by everybody, and you were white or black, blood.
Right.
And plus the pros were completely integrated. And if you want to play in the pros, that's future. But getting back to the war, to what extent did the Vietnam War affect people like yourself, young 22-year-old men in 1970?
Well, I think what began to happen there was people began to realize, like the aforementioned Alabama fans you're talking about, people began to realize it didn't matter what color a person was. If they had the talent, the skill, the ability, and so forth, they could play football, they could be a college professor, they could be an astronaut, they could be a pilot, whatever the case may be. And I think I think part of what you're saying, Stephen, is finally the country realized in total that if people have got all that stuff, they're just as good as anybody else at doing it.
Well, I think that's the lesson of the game. Now we didn't really see immediate. Jim Murray of the LA Times, who played a big role in Alabama because he had excoriated Alabama
Murray.
in '66 when they did not win a national title, even though they were unbeaten, untied, and won.
Right.
Was it the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl with Kenny Stabler? One of those two games. And it was given to Notre Dame, the so-called Catholic vote.
And Michigan State, who had tied.
Michigan State and tied, but you guys didn't lose to anybody. But you didn't, according to Murray, you didn't play black teams. So a lot of that was at play. But there was also an event, and we've talked about this. And I really credit you with helping me do the journalistic work to uncover something that wasn't previously known, because it was not known. Prior to my doing this book, it was considered religion at the University of Southern California that Bear Bryant had brought a shirtless Sam Bam Cunningham into the Crimson Tide locker room, placed him on a bench standing there, and said to you and your teammates and the coaches, "This here's what a football player looks like." And you were there. Tell us what did happen.
No, that was one of those old tales that got legs and just seemed to never stop. Nobody ever said that didn't happen. Of course, unless I was in the shower by myself, and I don't think I was, I never saw that happen. But I got to thinking about it after you and I talked about it. I wish it had happened.
I have heard Sam Cunningham actually didn't even realize people were saying this about him for decades. He was off with John Hanna playing in New England, and then he had a falling out with USC because they didn't recruit his brother Randall as a quarterback, and he went to UNLV instead. So he doesn't really hear any of this stuff until USC plays Auburn in 2003. But he said that a couple of players came out of the locker room, shook his hand. I'm thinking maybe you and Johnny Musso. Can you tell me whether you shook his hand after the game in the hallway?
I don't recall any of us. They had the locker rooms where they were set up at Legion Field. One was on one side of the end zone, and the other on the other side, and it was really kind of difficult to get between them. So I don't recall any interacting between the players after the game.
Okay. I also talked to Musso, and I talked to Clem Griska, and I talked to Coach Rutledge and a few other people who were in that locker room, and they verified what you said. But I have to tell you, I took some heat for discrediting that story. There was a writer named Lowell Schrader of the Long Beach Press Telegram, and he was he was a big-time Trojan sports columnist. Wrote a book on USC football history. He's not with us anymore. He was all over me for saying this story wasn't true. He said, and he claimed that he actually saw it. And I'm like, well, I don't think you did. I think, memories can be hazy, and emotions can cause a lot of different ideas about what happens. This was an unbelievably emotional event. But it didn't happen. I know that it didn't happen, and you verified that. And I wrote that in my book. And then when my book was optioned by some Hollywood producers, namely Carrie McCluggage and Barry Kemp. Barry wrote a screenplay in 2010, and he included the Bear Bryant story in it. And I said, look, it didn't happen. And if you don't believe me, because I was 11 years old living in California and listening to it on the radio, and I certainly wasn't there to see it. But if you don't believe me, there are a few people I can put you in touch with. There, Clem Griska was still alive. What was Coach Rutledge's first name?
Yeah.
Jeff
Rutledge.
No,
Jeff.
that was the player.
Coach Rutledge was still around, and he played. He told me that he played against SC in the 1945 Rose Bowl, I think. You were around. Johnny Musso was around. I said, "Here's Scott Hunter's phone number. I know he's amenable. Give him a call." And you said, "No, sir, it didn't happen." And to Barry Kemp's credit, he rewrote the screenplay, and it came out a couple of years later, and he changed the story. Because I told him, I said, "Look, these Alabama fans, they know this story, and they're going to hold very tightly to it. And they know this story isn't true. And we don't need to have a controversy that takes away from what is great about the story, because it's a great story about two unlikely guys, two men from the South of a certain age who come together and have a friendship and create an event, and even they're not really sure what exactly is going to happen. And it results in, frankly, Alabama's the winner of that game." I mean, USC.
Ultimately, Alabama was the winner. I mean, going out and beginning to really good players, they were leaving Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, within a very short period of time, Alabama is fully integrated and better than ever. And in the 1970s, they're probably even better than they were in the 1960s. And USC, oddly enough, because we talked about emotion, USC was so emotional. That game took so much out of them. You know, they went back and they lost to Washington, and they lost to Jim Plunkett and Stanford, and they did not have a great season. This wasn't one of the great USC years, but they did have a lot of sophomores on that team, players such as Lynn Swann and Charles Young and Mike Ray and Pat Hayden and all these kinds of guys who were only sophomores, and they later made up the 1972 national champions, which is one of the greatest teams of all time. But is there anything else you want to add?
Can we take a break right there? I got to go hit the boys' room.
Yeah, no problem. Harper and I will continue to discuss until you come in.
Be right back.
No problem. Well, Harper, you know the story of this game. Are any particular observations that you want to add?
Yeah, when Scott comes back, one of the joys that I have in hearing about the game and knowing how it turned out is they still got a full season of football to play. You know, it's a lot different from a player's perspective. Obviously, we've discussed at length for weeks different guests that have been on that have been a part of this and the history of the game itself. But here's a guy that actually played in it that has to get ready for next week. And he had watched film the week before. It was just part of the assembly line that a football player goes through during the course of a season. And Scott was certainly a part of that. He had to get ready for another game against a different opponent after that. So the significance of that game from a historical standpoint for him being a part of it, he's kind of separated from that. I really value the fact that he knows so much about it, but deflects from the hallowed glory of it. He was a football player and he was just doing his job. So a lot of cool things that were a part of that. It was a fantastic night for USC, and as you mentioned, Steven, the team itself they weren't great. I think Alabama was 6-5-1 that year in '70. They weren't great. They had a tie against Oklahoma in the Bluebonnet Bowl, which we discussed earlier. So they're just some normalcy that's a part of it too. It was a fantastic evening from a historical standpoint, but it's also just a football game. They ended up losing, even though they said, yeah, we started recruiting differently, and before you know it, the program was going to be at a completely different level.
Well, they came out the next year, and Bryant decides, Scott, the very next year, now you weren't part of this, but once the 1970 season was over, Coach Bryant took a trip to Austin, and he met with his friend Darrell Royal, and he says, Coach, I want to know more about this wishbone offense. And he teaches him how to run the wishbone. I think there's some people have called it the veer. Some people call it the wishbone. I've never really seen the difference. Keith Donovan, who was a U.S. At Alabama historian, he tried to explain the intricacies and differences between the veer and the wishbone. But the point is, it was a different kind of offense, and they practiced under a tarp with no writers around, and then showed some they showed some like 1970 game footage to the Trojans to study, which didn't have the veer. And they come out to the Coliseum in 1971, and they're running the wishbone on them, and they get out to a 17-0 lead. And SC finally kind of figures it out, because the SC did know how to deal with a wishbone. UCLA was running a very effective wishbone under Pepper Rogers during that time, but they were not prepared for Bama to do it on this particular day. And Alabama beat the Trojans 17-10 in 1971, and went unbeaten in the regular season, and finally lost to Nebraska in I believe it was the Orange Bowl. But it was just one big winning season after another for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But in the meantime, young Scott Hunter.
Now, Steve, I recall we were playing Buffalo. That game was on a Friday night for some reason. I don't know why it would be, but we played Buffalo, I believe, on a Friday night in exhibition, and we're flying back to Green Bay. Well, I go up, since it's a charter, I go up and ask the pilots, and that time they had the engineer. I said, "Do you think you can get the Alabama Southern Cal game on radio?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I'll call the company in Chicago, United, I guess it was, and I'll see." Well, they patch in the game, and I get the headsets on, and I'm sitting in the jump seat behind the two pilots. Well, it's not the Alabama broadcasters; it's the Southern Cal broadcasters.
Yeah, Tom
Alabama has come out with a formation and an offense that Southern Cal wasn't expecting it, and they're going on and on. I said, Coach Bryant's pulled one on them.
I heard, and I've never been able to get to the bottom of it, that at one point before Joe Namath was injured, Bryant used a form of the veer under Namath. Have you ever heard that story or know anything about that?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Scott, you were playing at Buffalo. You ended up winning. That was one of your 6 preseason games, your rookie year, going into Green Bay. And you're coming back from War Memorial Stadium. It was a Friday night. You're right, September 10th, and you had beaten them 20-14. And on the way back, you're up there with the cockpit. I think that's fantastic. And you were able to find the SC broadcast and be able to listen to the ball game, and just enough of it, because I don't think it was that long of a trip between Buffalo and Green Bay. You're probably in the air maybe an hour.
Hour and a half, maybe tops.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the game was underway, and of course the Southern Cal announcers were just perplexed at what the offense that Alabama was running, and Southern Cal just could not stop it. And I knew it wasn't the standard offense that we had run the year before, but the quarterback that was playing really wasn't the passer that we'd had in past years, including me and so forth. So they had gone to some kind of other formation, and I kind of figured that was that wishbone that he had liked when we get inside the 10-yard line to use.
So he did have something. So maybe that refers to the Namath story, that he did run some kind of an option play within the red zone.
all of the backs in the backfield as opposed to the Deer, which you would only have like two backs, like Houston, the Cougars ran with their two backs and so forth. But the Wishbone, of course, would have all three. And I thought, what a perfect offense, for Johnny Musso, with
Sure.
with being an
With
option.
those tearaway jerseys too, Scott.
Yeah, were they wearing the tearaway in '71? I thought they outlawed it. He wore it against Auburn, and he ran through about a half dozen jerseys.
There's an image in my mind of Johnny Musso with sort of a jersey that's torn right here underneath
Yeah.
pads, but I could be wrong. But you replaced Bart Starr. Holy cow. How do you do that? How does anybody do like that?
Going into the season, I was, the fourth quarterback when I arrived. It was a 6th-round draft choice. I had hurt my shoulder at Alabama 2 or 3 weeks before that Southern Cal game. So I really wasn't top notch. I dropped from probably a 2nd-round pick to a 6th-round pick. So the Packers picked me. I get up there, I'm 4th. Excuse me, but I have a good training camp. And they cut the other guy, and I'm now number 3. But Bart was having shoulder trouble, and Zeke Brodkowski was the backup quarterback, but Zeke was, Bart's age and so forth. And so, lo and behold, the first game we played the Giants, I had a pretty good exhibition season, as you noted, against Buffalo, and a few other exhibition games I'd played in. I did pretty well, and so. First game, Bart's out and Zeke starts, and we're not doing well. And I get to start in the second half and threw two touchdown passes, and we came back and almost beat the Giants 42-40. We lost. So after that, I knew that I could play in that league, and that was that.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship with Dan Devine, your head coach, and is it Bob Schnelker? Was he the offensive coordinator back then? He's the one that you had to work with every day, right?
Yeah, Bob Schnelker was a genius. I mean, everything he put up on the board and in the game plan would work. All I had to do was practice it and execute it in the game, and it would work. Play action pass, drop back pass, and so forth. If I did it right, it'd work. Now, Coach Devine didn't know what we were doing. He had come from an offense in college which didn't feature much passing. And so he was a little bit left out on a lot of that stuff. And so he just did what he did. And Bob Schnelker ran the offense and told me what to do, what to call, and so forth. And that's the way that went.
Well, that's another aspect of this. You called the plays. There were a lot of head coaches in those days that didn't have headphones on. There's only a few later on. I think Shula didn't wear headphones. There were a couple others in more recent days. There was only near late in his career that Tom Landry wore headphones. So this is a opinion, in my opinion, would be you really needed to know the game a lot better and the feel for the game. And listening to your lineman go, I think I got him on this one. Or I think I can go deep if you're a wide receiver. There's a different relationship than just being able to recite plays and then spit them back out, right? You had to learn that. Now, was that part of your Alabama training? Was that easy for you to do that? Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, Coach Brian and I would have breakfast on Friday morning, and he'd say, okay, show me your play chart. And I'd say, okay, 3rd down and 4, if there's such and such, this is what I'm going to call. 2nd down and 5 here. Score this is what I'm going to call. So he knew within a few plays what I was going to call. So I already had all that stuff worked out in my head before the game even started. So it wasn't like I was picking plays just out of the blue. And of course, when I got to Green Bay and the quarterbacks called their own plays, I applied, the same philosophy to my play calling there. And of course, Bart Starr and Zeke did the same thing. So I just fell right in with them.
Talk a little bit about it from a perspective where someone listening or watching the show right now would need to know what those conversations are like. You mentioned that you and Coach Bryant, or maybe you and Bob Schnelker would discuss play. Well, why are you doing that? Right? Was there a lot of that? What are you thinking? Not to question you and disagree with you, but just so you could articulate why you're feeling the way that you would. I really like the way that we've run that play this week in practice, or I think we did something 3 weeks ago that might be a surprise to your opponent. That's a part of that conversation too. Scott, talk a little bit about the importance of being able to freely discuss different play selections and being open to going, yeah, maybe that may not be the best play for 3rd and short. That might be a 2nd and long play.
Right. And it would be a little bit more narrower than you're saying. There was no wide open, like, let's go out here and run this, or let's reach out and run that. We knew what we were going to do. If it was 3rd and 6 at the Vikings 38-yard line, within 2 or 3 plays, we already knew what the call was going to be. I did, and so forth. And Bob had kind of honed me down into these plays are for this situation, and those plays are for that situation. And so it was no picking and choosing, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. And learning the entirety of the playbook very early on. I think your collegiate background for being able to memorize and all that all comes into play, but now you've got to be able to do so in a manner. You're going against, like you just said, a really good Minnesota team, one that would go to the Super Bowl that year or just come from the Super Bowl. You're going against just your division opponents. You may play and call different plays against Detroit than you would with Chicago. So learning all of that, being a rookie, that's not easy, but having guys like Zeke Barkowski and Bart Starr in the room probably, I'm hoping, made it a lot easier for you to be able to make those decisions both that first year and then later on in your career.
Yeah, I was a rookie, of course, that first year against the Bears. And to me, watching the Bears when I was that kid, that aforementioned kid growing up on TV back in Lucedale, and then standing there with the ball warming up and seeing the Bears come out of that tunnel in Soldier Field in those midnight blue jerseys, and seeing that number 51 came out, who everybody knew who that was. I said, I've finally arrived here.
What was that like seeing him across from you? Did you have any recollection of him saying something to you that, hey, Rook, hey,
So anyway, get to that. But anyway, I was starting, and as the game got along, we were tied, I think 14-14 or something of that nature. And Donnie Anderson says, Scott, we get down to about their 30, 35, they're going to blitz you, being a rookie. They're going to blitz you, see if you can handle it. So I'm going to act like I missed the blitz pickup on Doug Buffon, their weak outside linebacker. I'm going to act like I missed him. But really what I'm going to do is just come off of him and just slide out there in the flat. And you got me there if you need me. So sure enough, it was 3rd and 6 or so at there, about their 35. And I called the pass play that, of course, Schnelker had drilled into me, the one of the 2 or 3 I could choose and so forth. And I go back, I look at Carroll Dale, I look at Richmond George, nobody's open. And I see all this going on out of my corner of my eye. Donnie kind of stumbling off Doug Buffon and then just sliding out there. And I just popped the ball over Buffon's head, hands right to Donnie. He went down to the 5. We kicked the field goal and won the game. I said, these guys really know how to play this game.
Yeah. Pretty smart to be able to figure that stuff out on the field, right? You're not drawing it up on in the dirt, with your fingers, but the cerebral aspect of that and playing at that highest level, it's great. You got the Bears, the Vikings. Vikings were good that year, weren't they? There was a good football team. They ended up winning the division.
Yeah, there was a guy named Alan Page. He you had to get back and you had to get rid of the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he at least polite to you after he sacked you and put you on the ground and picks you up again and says, "Good job, kid"? Anything like that?
Nicest guy you can imagine. Nice. Talk to you during the timeouts. And when
I was a Superior Court judge or state Superior Court judge.
Well, yeah. And so when he was a judge, I was president of the NFL Retired Players Association, and we created an award for somebody of his statute, and I convinced everybody let's give our first award to Alan. So I had the fortune of calling him and telling Alan, we're giving you what I forgot what we call the award, but we're giving it to you for all of your time as a player and also as a judge and as just a great guy.
Logan, if you would, could you search for a Sports Illustrated cover from the early 1970s called "The Pack is Back"? Because I recall this headline that was in Sports Illustrated. So, Harper, why don't you continue with your questioning while Logan is looking for that?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. Vince Lombardi's gone, the trophies disappear, and the game starts changing. Super Bowl III, obviously, that was the last of the reign of Green Bay NFL titles. I think between Green Bay and Cleveland, they pretty much ruled the decade of the 60s, those two organizations. But now Dallas comes into play, and you've got Minnesota coming into play. They end up going to 4 Super Bowls during that decade. And from an NFC standpoint, those two played in every Super Bowl in the 70s except for the 72, which included the Washington Redskins. Could you tell, or was there a sense for you that the league is getting more AFC centric and doing things a little bit different? The NFC way wasn't really as successful as the Steelers, the Dolphins, the Colts when they switched over.
Right.
Denver was becoming good. Obviously, the Raiders were a part of all of that great history. Talk about that from your perspective.
Well, everybody likes to think that offenses were changing rapidly, Bob Greasy, Namath, and so forth and so on. But what was really changing rapidly was defenses. The 4-3 and 4 defensive backs was pretty much it. Excuse me. It was pretty much it. And then all of a sudden the 3-4 came in, and that the AFL teams ran, which came in as AFC when the NFL and the AFL came together. And now you're dealing with the 34, and the Kansas Cities that are running that kind of defense. And so there was a great deal more preparation and study when you're playing against a team like the Bears, who are predominantly a 4-3, or the Cowboys are predominantly a 4-3, or always a 4-3, and then you go to play Kansas City, which is playing a 34.
Talk a little bit about that from a quarterback perspective, from what you see. You've got a linebacker that is replacing the defensive end, let's say, and that's where the terminology comes in. Instead of 3 linebackers, you have 4. But really, you could have 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, an outside weak linebacker and a strong side. You've got 2 in the middle. And so that changes the way that you're going to run things, especially in the run game.
Right.
But for those that may not be aware of what that difference is, what does that do for you as a quarterback, knowing there's an extra guy there that we can't block because we don't have enough guys on that side of the field? We better not run on that side. We've got to switch an audible. You have to really pay attention in a different way, don't you, Scott?
Yeah, it all boils down to what my high school coach told me at Viger, Glenn Yancey. There's always in football 5 on this side and 6 on this side, or vice versa. So why don't we attack the side that had 5? And I remember that from the high school days. And so when we play a 34 team, I would begin to prepare, if I'm calling the plays, to go against the side that's got 5 instead of the side that's got 6. One less to block and one less to make the tackle.
Yeah. And when you're counting on the defensive side, even though he's a part of it, you weren't much of a running quarterback, so you got to take that away. There's really 10 guys, and then do they have 5 on one side or 6 on one side? Yeah. And if they have 6, that pretty much is going to be the strength, and they're going to want to run to 6 versus 5, right? That it's a cat and mouse chess match.
Yep. So you hit it right on the head. The Dolphins were stuck. They were a 3 down linemen, 4 linebackers, and you just had to find a soft spot with them and attack it.
Pretty simple, right? You would think.
We make it too complicated.
Well, you've got 3 years in Green Bay, and then you go to Buffalo. Talk a little bit about that transition for you. There's normal guys that go ahead.
We were in NFL player strike, and I was one of the team leaders, and Coach Devine wanted me to come to camp, and I said, Coach, I can't. I'm a team leader, and so forth and so on. I called Coach Bryant and said, Coach, what should I do? And he said, well, where are the offensive linemen? I said, well, Coach, they're walking around with signs and picketing. He said, well, you better be with them.
No kidding.
Stupidly, I made a mention of the Green Bay Gazette, what Coach Brown said. I think Coach Devine didn't particularly care for that. So anyway, I got traded to Buffalo. Great year, though. Juice was, at that time, great guy, and Buffalo was a good team. Joe Ferguson was a fine quarterback, and all that Coach Lou Saban wanted me to do was to back up there in case Joe got hurt. He knew he had a good team. He just knew that if Joe got hurt, he needed a veteran quarterback to get in there and run the show.
Yeah. You were close enough to that level where there's not the drop off between you and, let's say, a rookie, because the talent around Joe in those days was good enough to where they could compete with Miami, with Pittsburgh, with Denver and Oakland.
Right. So, they had a really good, fine team, good athletes at almost every position, of course, and wide receivers were terrific. That was just talented football team.
Yeah, the AFL, even Houston, they had won a couple championships. I know the LA Chargers, before they went to San Diego, they had some great teams as well. So the talent level, and predominantly, not exclusively, of course, but the scouting and bringing on of HBCU players and giving them a chance to play at the highest level where most people hadn't seen them. But when you're going against Curly Culp or Willie Lanier, Buck Buchanan, some of the smaller school guys that you got to see firsthand how good they were and how quickly they were able to adapt to a NFL level and become superstars.
Yeah, and AFL at that time was still trying to be the AFL, and a lot of hangover from that. And the coaches like Lou Saban and Don Shula and so forth doing what they were doing. So they still had their own style, as opposed to the NFC side of it that had their style.
Yeah, a little more wide open, would you say, the AFL? That's what the press would say. When I was a kid growing up, the wild AFL. There's nothing wild about it. They just played. When you got a guy that can throw a ball 65, 70 yards like Joe Namath could, don't you think that he and Weeb Eubank had a conversation or two? Joe, would you like to go deep to Maynard a little bit more often? Of course I would. Yeah, because he could do it.
Yeah, Joe could make any throw that was to be made. So that's, that was part, those quarterbacks on that side of it, I think, for the most part, were better throwers as a lot, maybe than the players in the NFC side of it.
Yeah, in some respects. Now you go to Atlanta, and then you've got another guy in Steve Barkowski that his feet standing on the goal line. He's thrown the ball over 102 yards before. You talk about another strong arm guy. What was that like?
Steve had a rocket for an arm. Good gracious. Throwing the ball far and fast was not the issue. What I wanted Steve to do was get it out of your hand in 3 seconds. Don't take the extra punishment associated with hanging on to the ball 3.5, 4.5 seconds. Because after a while, that punishment begins to, kind of mount up on you, as you know, have played the game. And also gives the receivers coming out of their breaks, their best separation is right around 3 seconds. After that, the defensive backs are so good, they start to close down the separation. So if you want to hit them when they're probably the most open, if you getting rid of that ball in 3 seconds, and that was the only thing I had a chance to tell Steve, but gosh, he was what a terrific athlete, terrific arm, and could throw the ball a mile.
Yeah, first baseman, a right fielder in college. Obviously, he had the strong arm and everything. And if you don't mind, this isn't Steve's show, but what a big guy. I mean, he's a large human being.
Oh, yeah.
A quarterback.
Yeah, Steve's 6'4", 225-ish, 230-ish. That was pretty big guy for that time. He was a pretty big quarterback.
Yeah, one of the taller, bigger bodies versus Fran Tarkenton or
everybody.
Stabler is tall, but
everybody typically my size, 6'2", 210-ish, and so forth.
Well, 3 years in Atlanta, and then you end up in Detroit. That was 79. Am I correct? You played there till 79?
Yeah, Atlanta had let me go, and I thought, gosh, I'm 32, 33 years old. I've done it. I'm through. I'm gonna go get a real job now. But Bob Snooker called me. They had lost. Gary Danielson had broken his leg in an exhibition game the previous weekend, and called me and said, "Hey, we got a good player up here, but quarterback, but we need a veteran backup. Do you want to come up and do you want to play?" I said, "Well, sure. Under you, I'm happy to." So went up to Detroit. Gosh, it was tough to put on that blue and silver, though. Oh, it hurt.
Well, Honolulu Blue is actually a statement nowadays. The Lions are finally making some noise, and Dan Campbell as a head coach is pretty interesting. But it was rough going there for quite a while. They were a great team in the 50s and early 60s. I mean, great football that came out of there with obviously Doak Walker and Bobby Lane and the guys. But they've really struggled. Was there anything in particular about how it is Detroit, and it's a tough place to play?
No, great fans. I mean, the fans weren't the problem. We were the problem on the field. Yeah. we weren't as good as our fans. Monty Clark, good coach. Bob was a good coach and all, but we just didn't measure up to how good our fan base was.
Yeah, and you didn't play when was the Silverdome built? I thought that was early 80s. Am I correct there?
I played in the Silverdome. And
you did? Okay.
I think they demolished that a few years after and moved back downtown to Ford Field.
Yeah, during the late mid-70s is when the end of the Milwaukee, Chicago, and Detroit, where you'd have two teams on the same side of the field. They did that also in Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. So all of your NFC, the Central Division, right, Black and Blue Division, you've shared the sideline with all your guys.
Well, not Lambeau, across from each other, but Milwaukee, you had to be on the same side because of the television camera angle. They wanted the two teams to be on the same side so they wouldn't be shooting over the player's head, and the players, would be detracting from the camera angle. So that was the reason for the two teams being on the same side, both at the old Milwaukee County Stadium and in Minneapolis in Veterans Stadium.
Mm-hmm. And Detroit too, didn't it? Didn't they also have when they played at Tiger Stadium? Not in the Silverdome, of course.
You're right. You're right. Tiger Stadium also were on the same side.
Yeah, the configuration of baseball fields started changing in the mid to late 60s. Shea Stadium, Busch, Riverfront, Three Rivers, all of them just say, let's make it a little bit bigger. But the previous ones, it was tough, even in New York with the Yankee Stadium, just smaller fields for football.
Yep. So
well, you got to be a part of that. What a great career you had. Congratulations on being able to be formative like that. And then you come after you're done with, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Was that a part of the decision making? And you end up getting into broadcasting. Would you mind sharing how that came about?
Certainly. And back to Mobile here, and I was thinking about going into the coaching job. I got an offer to go be a quarterback coach in the NFL with a certain team that I liked. I liked the head coach. But the CBS affiliate here in Mobile, the owner approached me and asked if I was interested and seeing if I wanted to be a TV sportscaster anchor. And I said, I don't know anything about that. All I have been is on the other side of it, being asked the questions. He said, don't worry about that. We'll train you. They didn't train me. They just put me in front of the mic. And anyway, I was there 19 years.
How about that? They always told me, you say you have a voice, a face for radio and a voice for newsprint. You obviously didn't have that issue, right? Was that an easy transition for you because you already knew most of the players, or just study for a couple of minutes and what a quarterback's going to do, what an outside linebacker is going to do, and when they do it well, you're able to comment on it. In high school and college sports, I would imagine that was an easy transition for you.
Well, I went to the sales manager. I said, what should I talk about on TV? And the sales manager and two of the top salesmen at the CBS affiliate took me to lunch. They said, we'll tell you what to talk about. Since you're in Mobile, Alabama, you talk about Alabama and Auburn football every day.
That's it. And then if they were a car dealer, let's talk about my cars. I've got a sale, a president's sale coming up this weekend.
And the car dealers will buy commercials when you attract fans of Alabama and Auburn to watch you.
You figured it out, didn't you? That's pretty easy. So you like that, I guess, right? Wasn't that interesting for you did that fall into your lap, or was that something that you said, I got to get an agent and we got to pursue some things?
Yeah, totally fell in my lap. And then the second year I was there, CBS, Coach Bryant, I think, kind of tipped them off or did a favor for me. He got me on with them as a color analyst, but CBS got college football for 2 years and then lost it in a court battle in '84. And Lindsey Nelson and I, the great sportscaster, we worked together, and boy, what an icon he was to work with.
Did you ever have to, on the air, say, Lindsey, I have no idea why you're wearing that color sport coat? That sticks out to where even that's got me. I work with you all the time, Lindsey. This one sticks out as much as any one of them.
Well, they stuck us. We had to wear the blue sport coat with the little CBS, remember that little eye on it you put in your pocket?
You had the logo, yeah.
We had to have that little eye on. Of course, I wore a little red hanky, silk hanky with it my wife gave me, and that's what we wore. So Lindsey had to leave the colored wardrobe you're talking about. He had to leave those in the closet for CBS.
Did he? Okay, I know there were a few NFL games where they allowed. This is probably the '70s. When you started working with them, they got a little more uniform.
Yeah, I think the college guys want a little bit more play down here.
Now, in some of the production meetings, especially for playoffs and things like that, Summerall, Brookshire, I guess the CBS pregame show for the NFL would be with Musburger, Irv Cross, Jimmy the Greek, Phyllis George. Were you exposed to all of that part of the network for football?
I was on the college side.
Sure.
I did the college stuff on Saturday. That was the NFL side on Sunday. I was the college side.
So they just stuck you there, and you didn't. Did you desire to be at the NFL level, to be like crew number 2, 3, or 4?
Certainly, if it came up, but I was busy doing the college games and preparing for those, and so forth. So I didn't give it much thought regarding moving on to the NFL side. I basically was enjoying the college side and enjoying being with Lindsey Nelson during a broadcast. It was just like being with an icon of sports broadcasting television.
One of the things I learned as an analyst is this symbol means, hey, shorten down your comments because I got to get back to the game. Where there are little times that you go, hey, I've got a story that I'd love to tell, but you can't do it during the broadcast. Or there are other times where Lindsey looks at you and he goes, no, keep it going. That's a great story. It's I love you painting pictures of what's going on that helps this broadcast.
He was just terrific like that. He would give you a clue. Now it's time to drop out and let the crowd noise and the band and all that catch the flavor of all that. But now it's time to tell your anecdote, because I'd already told him what anecdotes I was going to talk about during the game or so, and he would just tip me off by tip off. We had a code word for it. And I'd tell my anecdote. So anyway, he was a classic.
Yep. There's one of the 70 sports coats that he's wearing right there. Thank you, Logan. I appreciate it. Scott, you're also you're a professional pilot. Let me call you that. My dad flew for.
That's not one more word about Lindsey. Lindsey calls me and he's writing his book, and the editors they want to call it something about his New York days when he was the Mets broadcaster or something. Anyway, and I said, wait a minute. There's only one name for this book, and it is your classic sign-on. Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsey Nelson. Well, that's the way the book came out. The title was, Hello, Everybody, I'm Lindsey Nelson.
How about that? You even had a hand to do with the title of the book. I love it. Good friend, did you do anything? I'm sure when you worked together, you'd have probably dinner or get together and chat on Friday nights when you're going to specific venues across the country, and then Saturday game days. those are special times. Obviously, you and the icon get a chance to meet. And what were some of those experiences like?
So we're doing Kentucky and Tulane, and we go out to where Seabiscuit, not Seabiscuit, one of the big horses. What's his? Help me.
Secretariat.
Secretariat? Which horse?
Secretariat, where the farm he was on. And I'm thinking, gosh, I'll hear some Kentucky football stories and anecdotes I can work into the broadcast tomorrow. We got out there to a big party at Callaway Farms, whatever it was, and I heard nothing at all about Kentucky football. All I heard was about this horse bred that horse, and this horse could run that fast. Finally, after about 30 minutes, I looked at Lindsay. He went,
You didn't want to hear about siring a great line of thoroughbreds? Oh, those are quarter horses. We know. Yeah.
We were out there. We found the steakhouse. No horse talk.
Scott, I wonder when Nick Saban took over at Alabama, did he bring you in? Have you talked to the team? Did he make an effort to really incorporate Alabama's gloried past into the present?
No, Nick wasn't one to do all that. He came in with a plan and he stuck to his plan. And the former players who were around, he was cordial and such as that. But he had a plan, he had a process, and he stuck clearly to it. So one of the players said one time after he spoke to the players, he would come in, speak, be gone. And said, golly, he kind of has a personality like a porcupine. I said, hey, if he wins games, who cares if he's a porcupine?
Yeah.
His success is unrivaled, right? I know you had the great pleasure of being a part of the tradition and history at Alabama with Bear Bryant, but Nick is on a separate pedestal, right? He deserves his trophy as well, for obvious reasons.
Sure.
And taking
I would often remind players what Coach Bryant had told me, and he told the team. I don't know if a lot of players were listening, but he was just digressing. He said, look, everybody thought when I got here, I made this program and I did this and I did this. They don't realize this program was a championship program when I got here as a freshman in 1930 something. And if this team has the right coach, it'll always be a champion. And I would tell players that. I said, that's what we've got now with Coach Saban.
Yeah, it just the structure, the infrastructure, the cornerstones are in place, that you're in the right place. You've got left, right, north, maybe a little bit south, obviously, to recruit and bring guys in, and a couple of bucks here and there to fly some kids in from different parts of the country that want to be a part of it. How could you not have success? But there's other organizations, LSU, Tennessee, they have great programs, but they have always looked up at what you do.
Well, Alabama, you just know that you're expected to win. And to win, you have to do all the hard things all the time. While the other guys may want to take a day off or something else, you have to do the hard things all the time. Be prepared, be ready, and be a class person as well as a class player on the field. And all that kind of generates championships, if you will.
Yeah, couldn't say it any better. Scott, it's been a pleasure having you. You've given us 2 hours of your time. We'd love to go another 2 hours. But before we do, Steven, final thoughts from you.
Well, this has been a real pleasure, Scott, and revisiting all of the events of my book, One Night, Two Teams, has just been great. And we've talked about that game a lot on this show. We've gotten a lot of different perspectives. We've gotten the USC perspective, the Alabama perspective, white perspective and the black perspective. We got the Scott Hunter perspective, and I think yours is you really possess this this understanding of. I think you're just one of these people who knew your surroundings and what was happening around you and paid attention. And so years later, when we ask you about it, you have great recall of it. So I want to thank you so much for providing some of that recall to us, Harper and myself here on Take 5 with Steven Travers. Thank you, Scott.
Well, Stephen, your book was really an icebreaker, if you will, in that area. I think it's an important book for the ages.
Well, thank you. God bless you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Scott, for all that you did for the National Football League and college football and even for Mobile, Alabama and Vigor High School, we want to thank you for being a part of our show here today. We appreciate all of your recollections, the fun stories, some of the things that you were a part of in terms of being in the first national television audience, playing at the University of Alabama for Paul Bear Bryant, being a part of that infamous game there with USC, and all the other memories. We want to thank you as well for being on Take 5 with Steven Travers. This is Harper LeBel along with Steven Travers and our special guest today, Scott Hunter. We want to thank you for being a part of the 100 Yards of Football Network. We are grateful for you spending a little bit of your time with us, and we want to say thank you very much. So for Steven, for Scott, myself, I just want to say thank you for tuning in.